right to this information. And I think that kind of culture, we think, is still kind of continuing on today with regard to sharing that information with the press, with the general public. Okay. Something else?
In our group, we were talking about the need to be strategic in the way that we share information, to not just information about the congregation, but about the message. Anything else?
Yes, I think you had a very good thing about making a choice as to which avenues. Remember you said you need to pare it down, whether you use Facebook and Twitter, you want to say. I thought that was interesting.
We were talking about the fact that sometimes we are everywhere. We try to be everywhere using the social networks. So we are using too much. To be everywhere, we say nothing. So it's better to keep, for example, we think that Facebook or Google Plus are the most useful for us. Use it to optimize the information, to get people to go on our website to see information and contrary. So, for example, I was telling about the place in which I'm working now. It's a huge institution. They are the Lasarian Brothers. It's a big institution, huge institution, but they have too much and they don't know how to spread and share information because there's too much to be analyzed. So we are discussing on how to finalize information better. So that's the reason why we told we have to be synthetic and strategic in this way. It's up to us to communicate our word in this sense.
I know with the question about that, which is the relationship between press, journalists, and the social network? How do you use it? Do you use it just to share your articles and news, or also to get information?
It's another puzzle to add.
We need another meeting.
Yes.
Yes?
We spoke about coming forward with something that happened in the congregation straight away. We agree with that, but at the other hand we say it's not so easy because you also have to protect your members. Example, sometimes somebody is accused, but not anything has been proven yet. So how to be straightforward and at the same time also protecting your members.
I just wanted to share what we had somebody who was deceased and was accused, and we really didn't go to the press. But what happened is
The press came to us.
a party went to the press, and so we probably would have been better off had we prepared our own statement ahead of time.
Yeah, it's okay, but we said coming straightforward that's important, but at the same time you have to protect people.
Yes.
And one of the things we have as a rule is also let one person speak to the
Yes,
press,
yeah, we
so
have.
that not everybody says something to the
Yes.
press.
This should be the role of the press
Yeah.
office, press.
The question of protecting members was also in line with I brought the example of 20 years ago in Rwanda. Things were happening. We knew things, but we couldn't say. We could not come forward because our sisters were still living there. She spoke about Sudan, the same story. So there are situations where you have to weigh very carefully what you are saying and to whom you are saying it.
So, are you talking about like the sisters were in a dangerous situation, and so you can't talk about a political situation?
Yes, it was about coming forward and telling what's going on, but it's not so clear-cut.
Other inputs?
I also am frightened of a journalist or what they could ask, but most of all what I could say myself, how I'm going to say. And so I'm a bit frightened. But all you said as tips and who is journalist, how does he reflect, what does interest him, how to communicate, all these things help us a lot because we do communicate. We're looking for communication and what is going to help to be heard, to be understood, to be... So I found it very interesting, these tips, even if I'm scared of journalism. Because I recognize it, that the thing to be up to the point, to be brief, to respect your work.
Also the theme of formation. I mean, in the congregation we have to train people who will be able then to deal with press and also other aspects of the communication. Because this is a part of our work on communication, the relationship with press. Okay, some other considerations, inputs, suggestions. Okay, what do you think? You still think? I invite Marianne here to share her experience, a concrete experience, bad or well, we don't know, good or bad, we don't know. Well, this is something probably quite a few of you have heard about anyway. You may remember last June there were two sisters trapped in a lift in Rome for 3 days. Now that was my former Superior General and former Secretary General. And when they came out of the lift, or they were taken in the car, two Carabinieri cars over to the hospital over the road, and so that immediately alerted people that were interested. So there were journalists appeared almost immediately to start trying to find out what had happened. Now at that point, we were between administrations. The new administration, the Superior General was still in Australia, and the old one had been in the lift, and she was in San Carlo Hospital. So, and I was in England. There was only the two of them in the house at the time. Now, they decided that they were going to say nothing. So, nothing to the congregation, nothing to the press. So, the journalists that showed up at the hospital, luckily the nurses and doctors were kind and didn't let them into the room where the former Superior General was. And so they couldn't find out anything there. Eventually, the Irish journalists found out because the former Secretary General was Irish. Then the New Zealand newspapers and everybody heard. So people were phoning the house, people were coming to the gate, and nothing was said. I found out the next night what had happened, and so I tried to get in contact with some people and ask some of our sisters who were sort of higher up than myself, could somebody write something and say what had happened? Because the sisters didn't know. The sisters were reading what was in the papers,
Because there was no concrete information, the press was making stuff up. There was pictures of our house, which were accurate, but there were people in habits, and there were all kinds of other stories and all sorts of stuff that were made up about this. And some of our sisters thought, oh, we're not even supposed to know about this, so they didn't write, they didn't ask. So, to my mind, it was an example of a really bad way of dealing with the press, that we should have had a press release written that said, this person and this person were in the lift, and this is what happened, and then given that to the journalists, and then it would have been finished. But it kind of kept on going and left everybody feeling kind of funny because they didn't know what was true and what wasn't. So this is an example of how not to deal with the press.
Thank you, Marianne. So it was another good experience, but something that from where we can learn. My experience was bad too. But I have one consideration before that I've been learning here, working at USG and the communication office, that your time, your schedule is always yesterday. It's always different than ours. I mean, I'm not a religious woman, but I know my people, and the time to get used to the idea that you have to give an interview is like, it takes at least 3 days. Then you have to decide and ask the question, then you have to share the answers with the group. So you can imagine that your schedule is completely different than ours. So I don't know how we can meet. We have both need a change. But anyway, our experience was related with UIG, but not inside, was a project that we have. One of our friends who is helping this project gave or shared off topic or off records or share with journalists what this project does from his point of view. He's used to deal with journalists, so he used very strong images, a very strong and impacting data, statistics, events about this project. Concerning, of course, the theme was what the religious sisters do on this topic at the grassroots level all over the world. So the journalist wrote an article quoting various sentences said by this man. And he introduced this man as the coordinator of this project. He wasn't, of course. So the real coordinator of this project started to receive many, many phone calls from all over the world. This was very interesting. This happened in the United States. We received phone calls from all over the world, believe me, from all over the world, asking to interview the sisters who made these strange things that this man shared with the journalists. We really don't know if these events really happened. So we don't know if these sisters really did these kind of things. They are nothing extraordinary, but they were very impacting. So the journalists were, now we can interview some sisters who did that. So we decide to answer to all. We decide not to prepare a press release, but we decide to answer to all, say that we have, that we are available to explain what we do, but that we couldn't say anything about this interview. But nobody wanted to interview the coordinator because they are not interested in the project. They are interested in these events because they are more live, more, how can I say, more. So it was interesting because we asked, which is the news, what we do, what we really do, or this kind of thing. So nobody was interested in our project. Okay, so that's my experience. You have a lot of inputs. all been at the same time.
I'm sorry to be part of such a horrible profession. No, I think the answer to Patricia's example is always explain the relationship. So if you are meeting with the journalists or you're asking someone to meet with the journalist, just make sure the barriers of the conversation are clear. Is this something that is completely on the record? If I tell you about it, can you write about it? Or is it something where I'm telling you some things you can't write about? At the beginning of a conversation, make sure it's clear. Just know that when you call a press conference or you put out a press release, those are on the record. Normally that's going to mean that that's being written about. I think with Marianne, I think you answered kind of your own story. I mean, it's horrible that people would care all that much to do that about women who are stuck in an elevator. But exactly, I mean, you could have written a very short statement. And in that situation, you can just put it on your website and just say, you can tell people, just go to our website. And even if it's very short, as you say, whatever they don't. The question about social media, I use Twitter. Twitter is one of the most important reporting tools that I have. It's a real-time update analysis of what's going on in the world. It's just incredible. And so over the past three or 4 years, I've begun, you begin to follow people who you know are writing or saying or doing things about areas you're interested in. And in the past several years, more likely than not, when I learned something interesting, I've learned it from watching Twitter. Because people might be at an event and they might tweet something from it. If someone's at a Vatican event and there's a cardinal speaking and they tweet what the cardinal said and it's really important, I learn right away, and then I know that it's something I can do later. It's just so useful. So for me,
Explain a little bit more of that. Because my cousin who's Ron, R-A-I, they're just getting into Twitter because it's so important.
yeah.
Explain a little more. I don't see Twitter as important.
Well, what Twitter is, it's basically, it's like a real-time live feed for anyone in the world. So you can post in 140 characters, a sentence or two, something that's, you can post anything. For me, when I'm at an event, what I'll do is I'll start posting what the person is saying at the event in real time. So people who are watching, you could just decide to follow someone on Twitter. So you think someone's saying something interesting. And then you have a home feed, and it shows you what the people you are following are saying in real time. So, after a while, after you started to follow people who you are really interested in, that home feed becomes very useful because it's the people you're most interested in saying things. So my Twitter feed is, I got bishops and cardinals, I've got Twitter accounts of dioceses, I've got, different Catholic social agencies, different reporters, and I can turn on Twitter at any moment and learn a whole bunch of things all at once. It's very useful. And for me, then publishing something, if I'm at an event, I can publish what's going on, or I can publish links to my own writing.
Yes, that's what's interesting too.
So it's very useful. It's also really time intensive. And you can just get stuck in it. And I don't know, I think what you said about using Facebook is really smart. Because Facebook is something you can post and people will see it. It's not, Twitter is something so time intensive and it's so at the moment. Whereas Facebook is something you can post, and people will see it throughout the day and will come to it. But you have to make kind of your own judgments. I never use Google+. I just never found it useful. Basically Twitter and Facebook. I don't know if there were more questions about that, but about the situation of wanting to protect people or identities, I can only speak as a journalist, and I can't speak to whatever other considerations, legal or otherwise. Obviously, if something happens, you should be consulting with any number of people about what to do. As a journalist, my inclination, my intuition is to be as public as you can, in as sensitive a way. And so it really depends. In the United States, especially with priests, we now have, well, most of the dioceses in the country are now obligated to say certain things. So if a priest is accused of something, they have what's called a review board, which is supposed to review each case. And even sometimes when the review is underway, they'll say, this priest is under review. Normally they'll suspend that priest for a period of time while the review is taking place. And then they'll say, we'll tell you more when we've done the review. Obviously the downside there is if a priest is if a priest has been accused and falsely, and that happens, the vast majority of complaints are not false, but it does happen. And then it's been announced, and it's very hard for that priest or whomever it is to kind of go back to ministry. But you have to think about the standards, and many religious orders follow different standards. In the U.S., most religious orders follow the same standard. They have auditing organizations. I don't know, internationally, I don't know what that's like. You're obviously going to consult different people, you're going to consult different options. But my inclination is just to always be as public and forthright as you can. And if there's something you can't say, you can tell people that. Say it's a sensitive situation, and at this point we can't provide you with more information. I don't know if that helps, I don't know. Especially when you're dealing with an international order and there's people who could be in harm's way. And at some point you can explain that when that's done. Months, years, whatever it is, I don't know. And I think the first point was about being frightened of the press. I try not to be scary. I think the key there is to just think of us as people, and people trying to do a job. And if you build relationships with people, and you build relationships with people who you think might be working in your area or the things you're doing, then in the end it gets to be less frightening and more just part of what you do in your life. And we all build relationships, from the porter at the front door to whatever else you're doing in the day. And if you can make, especially if you're a communication professional, and you can make building a relationship part of your job, it gets a lot easier. I mean, it's a lot easier for me, I don't know. There are certain orders where I know people very well. I've worked with them for several years, and if something were to happen, and they called me or whatever it was, I'd have a much better understanding of what was going on. And, I've gone to coffee with that person, I've done that. They sent me a press release a couple weeks ago about something they were doing. At least you got a little bit of a relationship. And that's always helpful. If I hear from someone and I don't know them and I don't know what's going on, it just takes time. And when there's not something, you can always reach out. You can always say, you might be interested someday in having a coffee to learn more about what we're doing, or here's a sample press release, or just trying to build that relationship, I think, is very helpful. And then when something goes wrong or something goes right and you need to announce something, they're more likely to listen because you've spent time with them, and it's just kind of basic human relationships. So, I don't know if that answered. I think people had more questions.
So just to expand a bit on this building relationships, so how do you go about building a relationship? Is it as simple as just sending them a press release or sending them...
Yeah, sure. I mean, I get
Christmas
several,
card?
yeah, definitely. Those types of things are really nice. I get several emails a day from different people who just want to say, hey Josh, I know you write about the Vatican, you write about religious sisters. Just want to tell you, I'm part of whatever, and this is what we do, and if you want to talk more about it sometime, let me know. I mean, something so simple as that. You don't even have to be announcing it. You can just be reaching out and leaving your contact information. to me is if you have someone in your congregation with an expertise in something. Hey Josh, I know you read about the Vatican a lot. We've got this canon lawyer who's really good. If you've ever got a question about whatever, feel free. You know, that type of stuff is really useful because there's all these news stories we have to write about. And we need someone to help us understand what's important, what's going on. So you all have so many experts in your congregations, theologians, canon lawyers, ministers, whatever it is. That can be really helpful. Because then that means that's in my contact list, and when the news happens, I don't have to be searching. I can remember, oh yeah, there was this whomever with Good Shepherd Sisters and it's in mind.
So often, I think, I know, in the past, in my own experience, there's been a fear to talk to the press because they're secular. I mean, you're different. You understand religious life, you understand the church. But in another place, they don't have a clue.
Yeah.
And you're going to talk to them, and they're not going to understand, and they're going to get it wrong.
Yeah.
What do you do? What can be done?
Well, the basic thing is to be patient and to explain. And so you don't want to be condescending or patronizing, but you can be patient and explain things in a very general way. I mean, even many secular writers don't even know the difference between a sister and a nun, right? Or between, they might have an image in their mind of a religious sister being someone who never leaves the cloister, right? So you have to be patient, and that's part of the relationship building too, helping people understand better. I mean, it's just like anything else. If I were to go tomorrow, if my editor told me tomorrow, you're not going to write about the Vatican anymore, I really want you to cover soccer. I'd be a bit, I'd be out of my depths. I'd have to, when I spoke to people, I'd have to, learn what the rules are, what they mean when they refer to people, what the different types of kicks are, all that. And just try to explain it simply and generally, and say, if you have any questions, ask. Just basic kindness, really.
Would it be helpful to have some background information on our website? Like I don't know, if you were, let's say you needed to do something about a particular congregation, so you would first do some research?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, if I have to look up a congregation, first thing I'll do is Google them, and it's just information on your website, about what kind of ministries you're involved in, where you are in the world, maybe, the history of your founder or something. All that can be really helpful. Most orders now have that kind of stuff. I can't read it all, but, it gives me a sense of what's going on. And,
I think that it's also important to prepare like a folder for journalists, so just to have, before giving more longer information, just the most important data, and dates, data and information that you can use to have at least an idea, And I think that again it comes up the importance of formation of people, sisters also, who can deal differently and more professionally with press, because otherwise you can make more mistakes, and then instead of take advantages of the possibility of this relationship, We usually, for instance, at the USG, when we have to give interviews, we usually try and make simulation also with a sister who had to do it. It might be, a joke, but it's important because they get used to the video, they get used to a microphone, and then, and I see the change when they go directly to the journalist. So.
The folder with information is particularly helpful if you're having a press conference. So you can give us a little folder with 3 or 4 pieces of paper in it about who is speaking, where they're from, why they're important, some background information about the order, and then about whatever you're announcing, and then who to contact. That's really nice. It's even now pretty standard that when we get that folder, there'll be a really cheap USB drive in it.
do not have other questions, I think we can thank Joshua.
Thank you.
And wish you a good work without scaring
Yeah,
religious women.
I won't be frightened.
Okay, I invite Patty to close with some information. We will meet in April 8, the next